Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Educational AD Podcast. We'll be right back with today's guest, but as always, we want to give a shout out to our sponsors. Now, don't hit that fast forward button. These are all companies that I used as an athletic director or I've got a direct connection to. You should be using them too. So take a listen to our shout outs. It's only going to take about 3 minutes. Then listen to our interview and then go visit these sponsors. I'm telling you, you're going to be glad you did. We want to say thanks to Hometown Ticketing, the leading digital ticketing provider to schools and colleges. Go to hometownticketing.com. It's digital ticketing that offers more. We'd also like to thank Gipper. Go to Gipper.com, start creating world-class content to celebrate your athletes and promote your teams. Gipper's used and trusted by over 4,000 high school and college programs across the country. It's professional graphic design made easy. Go to Gipper.com to get started. We'd also like to say thanks to Home Campus. Home Campus is a platform you're going to use every single day for things like scheduling, student athlete eligibility and clearance. Who doesn't do that every day? Uploading rosters, communicating with your stakeholders, communicating with your state. Home Campus is going to do it better and faster. It's going to leave you with a lot more time. To get started, all you have to do is go to homecampus.com. That's it. Go to homecampus.com. We'd also like to say thank you to Vital Signs Wall of Fame. Go to their website, vitalsignswalloffame.com. Check out their interactive touchscreen, that's right, touchscreen video consoles. It's a great way to show off your school record boards for all the teams, for all the sports, or your school's Hall of Fame. It's also a great way to share your school's unique history and your proudest moments. Go to vitalsignswalloffame.com. Mention the podcast, you'll get a nice discount. That's vitalsignswalloffame.com. We'd also like to thank Snap Raise. Have you ever spent weeks and weeks with a fundraiser and got little, if any, return? Go to fundraise.com. Go to snapraise.com for your fundraiser. Hands down, the best one that we've ever used. We used it at our school, tremendous success. Our coaches loved it. Our parents loved it. It works. Go to snapraise.com. You can check out their other great platforms. But if you're looking for a fundraiser, you found it. Go to snapraise.com. You're going to be very glad you did. We also want to say thank you to Huddle. Go to huddle.com and change the way you see the game. As a football coach, I used Huddle for years, but when I became an athletic director, I wanted a platform that was going to work for all of our teams, and Huddle came through like a champ. Our coaches, our athletes, even our parents just love the tools that Huddle provides our school to let our kids play at the highest level. Join the 8 million users. Turn your school into a Huddle school. We also want to say thanks to Ohio University's online Master of Science in Athletic Administration. This affordable 20-month online master's program focuses exclusively on interscholastic athletic administration. When you finish, you're not only going to have your master's degree, you're going to have 11 NIAAA leadership training courses that can go towards your RAA or CAA credential. You're also going to be part of a network of athletic directors and coaches and professionals across the country. To get started, go to ohio.edu/info/MAA. You're going to be glad you did. We also want to thank Sideline Interactive, indoor score tables and video boards. Go to sidelineinteractive.com and schedule a live web demo to see their score boards and their score tables in action. Probably the best purchase I ever made was our Sideline Interactive indoor score table. Go to sidelineinteractive.com. Schedule that live web demo today. We also want to thank Athletic Surveys by Lifetrack for sponsoring the AD Toolbox segment. Athletic directors already get feedback, but typically it's from a very small group that just want to complain. Athletic Surveys is going to connect you to that group, but they're also going to connect you to the 98% of your stakeholders that support your program. And that information is tremendously valuable when you're talking to a frustrated parent or student athlete, or maybe your principal or even your school board. Go to athleticsurveys.com. They're going to create a custom survey. It's going to let you take the pulse of everybody in your program. That's athleticsurveys.com. There we go. Hey, welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Educational AD Podcast. This is another segment in our series featuring the staff for the Florida High School Athletic Administration, Athletic Association, excuse me. And we're visiting today with somebody I like to call an old friend, Jordanne Stark. She's the coordinator of eligibility and compliance for the FHSAA. Jordan and I met a number of times when I was still an athletic director and serving on athletic director advisory committee, but also on sectional eligibility appeals meetings, which she was a very big part of. We're going to hear about that more. But Jordan, welcome to the Educational AD Podcast.
Thank you for having me, Jake.
Well, like I said, we've known each other for a while, but we always like to let our listeners have a chance to get to know our guests. So give us that quick bio, where you were born, where you grew up. Maybe take us up through your own high school and college days, and then we'll take a break. But what's the Jordanne Stark origin story?
Okay. So I was actually born right here in Gainesville, Alachua General Hospital, which does not exist anymore. It's all part of the new University of Florida Innovation Center. But right here in Gainesville, I grew up in Newberry, just about 17 miles west of Gainesville. Interestingly enough, I actually grew up in the same house my dad grew up in. Yep. And shared the same bedroom my dad had when he was a kid. And even now, I bought the house next door to my parents. So I am deeply rooted here in this area. Excuse me. I went to Newberry High School. It was very small. I had less than 100 students in my graduating class, just over 400 total in the entire school. So we had some limited activities available to us, very small class sizes, which was great. I cheered at Newberry High School, did the year-round situation. I was also a competitive cheerleader in the local all-star gyms. After graduating from Newberry, I went to the University of Florida, so I stayed local. But that was a big adjustment for me, going from 10 to 12 people in my class to 500 in some of those lecture halls. But I went to UF for my entire undergrad, got a degree in recreation, parks, and tourism. Did an internship with the City of Gainesville Parks, Recreation, Cultural Affairs. Did that under the Great Michelle Park. And then I started my actual professional career with the St. Johns County Parks and Recreation Department. I actually started out there with a grant program, teaching a nature program to elementary age kids. I rotated between 5 different sites, teaching that program, and then got hired on with their administrative staff and did a variety of different things. I worked beach operations. I ran a community center, did their rentals for their pavilions, worked after school care, just whatever was needed at the time. I did that until I started here at the FHSAA in 2011. Started out here as an executive assistant in eligibility and compliance, became an assistant director, then a director, and now a coordinator. So I've done 13 years in the same department.
Well, we're going to talk about all things FHSA in one of our segments. I'm going to go all the way back to Newberry. First of all, I didn't know all that. You're native Floridian. That's such a cool story about your dad's house. When you were in high school, you mentioned that you cheered for Newberry and also for, and this is my word, not yours, one of the club teams, all-star cheer. Your high school experience, oftentimes, and we've talked about this before on the show, oftentimes, hopefully not often, let's say sometimes, cheer is not part of a high school athletic program. And I was very fortunate at the schools I was at in Florida. Cheer either was already when I came there as the AD, or we took it under our wing and treated it like the sport that it is. What was your experience as a high school cheerleader? compared to, your club and your competitive cheer experience back at Newberry?
Sure. So when I was in high school, competitive cheer was not an FHSAA sport. So there was not that interscholastic component at the school level. So it was supported by the athletic program. They did find ways to help fund things for the cheer organization at Newberry High School. But it definitely wasn't treated as a sport. So we were kind of support to the sports, which is a vast difference from being part of the all-star gyms where you're the focus, you are the athlete. So we were looked more as part of that support system. We would do the pep rallies, we would do spirit tags for our athletes whenever they had games coming up. Just the encouragement throughout the hallways going into the game. So it was more support. That all-star part of it was more where I felt like an athlete.
Now, I was very fortunate as an AD. I had some great cheer coaches. They had, their own background as cheerleaders, but, dance and tumbling. I mean, they were just great, and they did a wonderful job with our student athletes. What was your experience like um, at the high school level? Was there, let's say, that expertise? I know, like a lot of sports, sometimes someone says, "Oh, by the way, you're the track coach," or "By the way, you're the cheer coach." What was your high school experience like back in the day?
So my first 3 years, we had a sponsor for the sport. Generally, it was somebody who was available, um, probably newer to the school. My first 3 years, we had a different sponsor each year. My senior year, I was actually pretty fortunate. It was my mom. My mom came in to be the cheer coach. She actually started the competitive cheer program at Newberry High School after I left. But she was involved in the all-star world when I was in middle school, throughout high school. She went on to be the cheer coach at Newberry High School for almost 20 years, and now she is coaching the club team at the University of Florida. So my mom brought in that expertise in my final year, but leading up to that, it was just whoever was available.
Yeah. Now, one more question about Newberry. It's grown a little bit since you were in high school, hasn't it? Isn't the school and the community a lot bigger now?
It's a lot bigger now. They actually have something crazy like 4,500 new builds in progress in Newberry right now. So yes, it is much, much larger than it was when I was there.
Yeah. Well, we're going to take our first break. For our listeners, once again, our guest today is Jordanne Stark. She's the coordinator of eligibility and compliance for the Florida High School Athletic Association. We are coming back, so please stay with us. This is the Educational AD Podcast. We want to say thanks to our good friends at Hometown Ticketing for their support of the podcast. Go to hometownticketing.com. It's digital ticketing that offers more. And if you go to hometownticketing.com, their staff is going to show you how you can set up and sell your tickets online, not just for athletic events, but things like school plays and concerts, school dances, even graduation. And here's the best part. Every school is assigned a dedicated client success manager. It's going to provide you hands-on support every step of the way. That's every step of the way. Go to hometownticketing.com. It's digital ticketing that offers more. We also want to say thanks to Gipper. Go to gipper.com. Start creating world-class marketing content for your school's social media channel. It's going to help you celebrate your teams and promote your athletes. Gipper's used and trusted by over 4,000 high school and college programs across the country. It's professional graphic design made easy. How easy? Well, it's so easy, even I can do it. Go to gipper.com to get started. Hey, welcome back, everybody. We're visiting with Jordanne Stark of the Florida High School Athletic Association. Jordanne, you mentioned that you had some internships and you had the opportunity to work with some local, for us in Florida, local parks and recs. Looking back at those days, can you think of a moment that at the time it really didn't seem like much, but now looking back, you can say, hey, that was a significant moment for me and it helped me with what I do today with FHSAA. Anything stick out for you?
Well, eligibility and compliance is a very unique area within the FHSAA. There's a lot of rules interpretations. There's a lot of reading, a lot of black and white, but you're also dealing with a lot of the gray area and how do things fit. And actually, part of my internship with the city of Gainesville, I was working on making sure that our department was in compliance with Florida statutes and things that we were offering. So at the time, I had no idea that that's actually the realm that I would end up in, interpreting those Florida statutes and making sure that we stayed in compliance. But here I am in compliance.
Now, I'm going to imagine that there was quite a bit of interaction with individuals. You mentioned you were teaching classes and things like that. A lot of your FHSA duties are probably more behind the scenes, except at competitions. I know you're very involved, with state competitions. What were some things that you learned in those early jobs that have paid dividends for you when you're working at those big FHSA events?
Sure. So one of the biggest things for me is communication, more specifically communication styles. So communication is one of those funny things, kind of like love languages. Everybody has their own way that they communicate with people and then receive communication. And that's been one of the biggest things that's helped me in my job is learning that even though I think I'm clear on something, somebody may not be receiving it the same way that I'm meaning for it to be received, and vice versa. Something that somebody is trying to convey to me, they may think that they're being very, very clear in what they're saying, and I'm just not receiving the information the way they want me to. So taking the time to back up and ask a few more questions, try to get to the bottom of what we're actually talking about. That's something that has really helped me throughout my career.
Oh yeah, communication and listening. It's one of the most frequently mentioned tools in our toolbox. I don't want to
Yeah.
poison the pool for your contributions later in the show. Um, you spent a number of years, working with some different entities there. What was it about the FHSAA that attracted you, and you said, "Hey, I think I'd like to try that."
Well, when I was with the St. Johns County Parks and Recreation, um, it was amazing driving on the beach and doing beach operations. Who wouldn't want to drive a truck down the beach and check on some beach tool operators? But really what I enjoyed were the youth sports. St. Johns County was really involved in youth basketball, and getting those kids into our different community centers, involved with coaches, their communities. And I really started enjoying that aspect of it. And when I saw the opportunity to not only work in that area, but go back home. I was really excited to see what that held for me. And obviously I liked it. It stuck for 13 years so far.
So far, yeah. Um, One of the topics that we talk about frequently is interviewing and the interview process. So, here you are, you're not some rookie out of college. You had some solid experience under your belt. Looking back at your interview, what were some things that you spoke to the expression I always use is you got to sell yourself. Okay. How did you sell yourself when you had some sports and rec, but really no athletics administration experience? So that's my question. How'd you sell yourself to the FHSAA?
Well, you're causing me to go into the archives here. It was a long time ago, but um, I was fortunate enough that the position didn't require that experience directly. The position was an executive assistant when I first got here. So having the experience in the office, working with people, having those difficult phone conversations when things weren't working out in our programs, um, having the experience at the community centers with the community, being flexible and adaptable and eager to learn. I think those are all things that helped me get the position here at the FHSAA. And then just having to prove myself in the actual area of eligibility and compliance to move up to where I am now.
All right, you open the door for this next question. I want you to take me back to one of those phone calls. It was probably a parent, could have been a coach or an AD, that they're mad, they're upset, and I guarantee you they don't know the rule or the situation that they're mad about. But without naming names or schools, take me through one of those conversations.
Well, it's exactly what you said. Usually we get people who are just mad and they don't really know why they're mad. Um, so, this rule has changed a lot since I've been here, but transfer rules used to be very strict in Florida. So a parent would call with a legitimate situation happening with their child and not understand what was going on. Um, 9 times out of 10, the student actually had a case for a hardship and had the ability to go through due process. They just were not aware of the due process system set up here at the FHSAA. So conversations starting out angry because their child had been told no with no recourse for the child to be back on the field, letting them talk, get it all out, and then explaining the rules to them and what their next steps were in that due process system to be able to get their kid back on the field. Those conversations were always difficult to start out, but usually you got the parent or the coach back on a positive side when they realized that this wasn't the end of the road for that particular student athlete.
Now, that's just so great, and I can just see you having those conversations. How many times, just this is just again from memory, how many times had the parent not even spoken to the athletic director? They just first time they're calling you right away. Can you give me a rough percentage?
Oh my gosh. I would say probably it's not as high as you'd think. They usually the person who told them no was the athletic director, but that's where the conversation ended. So not talking to someone at the school at all was probably about 40%.
Yeah.
They see a FHSAA acronym at the top of their forms and they said that's who I'm going to. Not understanding how the process works. But usually when we got a parent, they had talked to somebody, either an athletic secretary, athletic director, head coach, who said no, and the conversation ended there. So that's when we would get them. But about 40% had no conversation with anyone at the school before calling us.
All right. And again, we love our parents, so we just
We
love them.
do.
We're going to go and take a break. Our guest again is Jordan Stark. She's the coordinator for eligibility and compliance at the Florida High School Athletic Association. When we come back, we're going to take a deep dive into all things FHSAA. So please stay with us. This is the Educational AD Podcast. We want to thank Snap Raise for their support of the podcast. Have you ever spent weeks and weeks with a fundraiser and then ended up with little, if any, return on investment? Stop right here. Go to snapraise.com. Hands down, the best online fundraiser out there. We used it in our school with tremendous success. Our coaches loved it. Our parents loved it. It works. Go to snapraise.com. Check out their other great platforms. But if you're looking for a fundraiser, you found it. Go to snapraise.com. We also want to say thanks to Vital Signs Wall of Fame. If you're looking for a really cool way to display your school record boards for all the teams, for all the events, or your school's Hall of Fame, go to Vital Signs Wall of Fame. Check out their interactive touch screen. That's right, touch screen video consoles. It's also a great way to share your school's unique history and your proudest moments. The website is vitalsignswalloffame.com. Check them out today. We also want to say thank you to our good friends at Home Campus. Home Campus is a platform that you're going to use every single day. Things like schedules, eligibility and compliance. Who doesn't do that every day? Communicating with your parents, your coaches, your kids, uploading rosters and digital forms. Home Campus is going to do it better. It's going to do it faster, and it's going to give you as an athletic director a lot more time back in your schedule. To get started, all you have to do is go to homecampus.com. That's it. Go to homecampus.com. You're going to be glad you did. Welcome back, everybody, to the Educational AD Podcast. Jordan, you've been at the FHSAA now for 13 years, and I know you've worked in a couple of different areas. Can you talk a little bit with our listeners? And I know every state has its own association, and there's some differences, but I think there's probably a lot more similarities. What are some of the areas that you've worked in, and maybe um, where do you see or how do you see the FHSAA interacting with athletic directors, coaches, and the different organizations?
Okay. So Florida is unique in the way that we're set up. We have the individual departments for eligibility and compliance, communications, finance, and athletic services. A lot of times, whenever you look at other state associations, you have an individual who will handle the various aspects of athletic rules, eligibility and compliance, even the communication side for a particular sport. Instead of it being broken up into different departments. So we're a little more specialized here in Florida. I have actually been with eligibility and compliance all 13 years. When I came in, I was the executive assistant to the associate executive director for eligibility and compliance. So I was a little more on the support side, processing paperwork, answering very basic phone calls. I wouldn't dare answer a transfer question when I first started. I saved those for our directors at the time. But I was processing the sectional appeals paperwork. I was scheduling those meetings. I was getting materials ready for meetings, just more on that support side. When I moved across the hall to be an assistant director, I started picking up some allegations and self-reports, started doing some EL10 eligibility rulings, processing the GA4 affidavit of recruiting, working in, we had a different athletic platform at that time, working in that platform to process those forms. And then we transitioned, when I became a director, we split the work that was being done in eligibility and compliance to where both directors were doing the same job, just for different areas of the state. So I was handling the EL4 registration of foreign-born students, the EL10 for eligibility rulings, the EL13s for non-traditional students. I started at that time handling the handbook revision, sport manuals, administrative procedures. And then most recently in the last 2 years, we added another staff member to our department, and we basically became that eligibility and compliance liaison for different schools, separating it by alphabet. So I've been working with schools G through O for the last 2 years, doing all of those forms, the EL4, the EL6, the EL10, the EL13, picking up backup allegations and self-reports. And then moving into next year, we're planning to develop those relationships even more by splitting off into 4 instead of 3. We've added another staff member that's going to be joining us for the next year. So we'll be splitting those schools up even more so that we have the ability to develop those relationships, do a little bit more education, be a little bit more proactive. So when we do have to have those hard conversations about violations and sanctions, they're a little bit easier to have, having that relationship in place, and hopefully keeping schools from getting to that point by having more time to get involved with them on the front end.
Now, you mentioned, a couple of the standard forms in Florida, EL3, EL4s. Looking at eligibility from that education standpoint, I know in my 20 plus years here in Florida, FHSA has really stepped up in a very big way on being proactive and trying to educate ADs. What are some of the things that you think have really made a difference over the 13 years you've been at FHSA in helping athletic directors, stay away from, those violations? I think it's rare. It happens. There's ADs out there that cheat. but I think it's very, very, very rare. Usually it's a mistake. How have what is how have those educational initiatives helped reduce the number of those mistakes?
Sure. So that's different by topic. In all cases, we have started developing our flowcharts, and really pushing those to our member schools. We've also started sending out, at the beginning of each season, we send out an email to the schools that we're over, to let them know about things that are coming up during that season, forms that should be being turned in prior to those contests starting for that season. So we're communicating more, providing those flow charts. We've also started developing in the file library on home campus some sample documents. So if an AD is being asked to provide something and they don't normally work with that, we can now point them to a folder and say, this is actually what it looks like. You can show it to the kid, and they may see it and say, oh, I know what you're talking about, and be able to provide that a little bit faster than trying to explain it to the AD then trying to explain it to the family. So I really think those sample documents, the flow charts, communication, those have been making the biggest difference. We've recently started doing some PowerPoint tutorials with voiceover and video, showing ADs how to actually process different forms within our department. I haven't seen the results from that yet. Those are pretty new, but I think those are going to make a big difference as well.
Jordan, you mentioned home campus, which is the platform we use here in Florida now. And again, you also mentioned that we had a different platform back in the early days when I first came to Florida. What are some of the features about home campus? And yes, they are one of our sponsors, but what are some of the features that you think are really helpful for athletic directors? And again, you've got that historical perspective. What are some of the features that stick out for you?
Well, I think home campus is a very well laid out platform. When you first log in, you have your toolbar on the left-hand side. They're labeled very well, easy to find things. Not necessarily a feature, but they work very well with the staff here at the association, to quickly make changes whenever we hear from our member schools that something isn't functioning the way it should. So that's a great thing for us to be able to say, hey, can we please add an option to this drop down? Because the ones that are available do not apply to a situation that some of our schools find themselves in. The file library is a great feature that home campus has allowed us to put in place. We're able to organize that by sport, by department, by topic, and then break it down even further once you get inside those folders. So for example, eligibility and compliance has an initial folder you can go to, and then within that folder, we have it broken down by non-traditional students, foreign-born international students, self-reporting, allegations, academic performance contracts. So you can find all the information you want by going through that file library. I think that's one of the best features they have.
Yeah, and again, I can certainly echo that as an athletic director that used home campus. Their staff is just tremendous on those rare occasions where maybe something wasn't working or I needed help. Typically I either got an email or a phone call, usually within an hour. I mean, they were just so good. And I know what you're talking about working with you, because when we have our state AD Association conference, the FIAAA conference in May, not only is FHSAA staff usually there, but the home campus people are there, doing tutorials. Great stuff. Jordan, we're going to do this at the end of the podcast, but if one of our listeners wanted to reach out, maybe pick your brain a little bit, add you to their network, or just, find out more about FHSAA, what's the best way that they can do that?
I can always be reached by email, jstark, STARK, at FHSAA.org. That's going to be the easiest way for someone to get a hold of me. Also by phone, the main office number, and then I'm at extension 230.
And you can find all that information at the FHSA website. Our guest is Jordanne Stark from the Florida High School Athletic Association. We're going to take another break. I know that's shocking to our regular listeners, but we're coming back with more best practices. This is the Educational AD Podcast. We want to say thanks to Huddle for their support of the podcast. As a football coach, I used Huddle for years, but when I became an athletic director, I wanted a platform that was going to work for all of our sports, and Huddle came through like a champ. Our coaches, our student athletes, even our parents just loved all the tools that Huddle provided that let our kids experience sports at the highest level. Go to huddle.com, join the 8 million users, and turn your school into a Huddle school. We want to say thanks to Ohio University's online Master of Science in Athletic Administration. This affordable 20-week online program focuses exclusively on interscholastic athletic administration. And when you finish, you're not only going to have your master's degree, you're going to have 11 NIAAA leadership training courses that can go towards your RAA or your CAA. You're also going to be part of a nationwide network in K-12 athletics to build your resume and make more connections. To get started, all you have to do is go to ohio.edu/info/MAA. Check them out today. We also want to say thank you to Sideline Interactive, indoor score tables and video boards. Go to sidelineinteractive.com and schedule a live web demo to see their score tables and their score boards in action. Probably one of the best purchases I ever made as an athletic director was our Sideline Interactive indoor score table. Go to their website, sidelineinteractive.com, schedule that live web demo today. That's sidelineinteractive.com. Hey, welcome back, everybody, to the Educational AD Podcast. Jordan, you've been at the FHSAA for 13 years, and while you no longer go out on these particular visits, you and I, kind of got to know each other in those sectional appeals meetings. We have 4 sections in Florida, and if a parent, a coach, an AD, they want to appeal an FHSAA ruling, they have the opportunity to do that with representation from their section. So you were on a number of those. Kind of as a coordinator, you weren't making the ruling, it was up to the panel. But looking back on those days, do you have some, let's say, tips for our listeners, ADs? It's not avoiding the meeting's there. You're going to be going. What are some tips for success, maybe some do's and don'ts for a state athletic appeals meeting?
Okay. So I think the number one thing to remember is that this appeals committee in your area, athletic directors, principals, school board members, superintendents, and attorney, they don't know your situation. They're coming into this not necessarily blind. They're receiving a packet of information prior to the appeal, but they're only going to know what you provide them. And I think that's the biggest thing to keep in mind when you're providing the information that we ask for. Because each appeal is going to be different based on a different hardship, based on a different rule, there's not one list of documentation we can provide to tell you what to turn in. We do have those essential items that are required, a letter from the principal basically stating their position on the appeal, whether or not they support what's happening, a letter from the parent providing an explanation on the circumstances surrounding the hardship, their official transcripts since entering the 8th grade, their disciplinary record, their proof of age. Those are all basic informations relative to the student, but we need more information on the specific hardship. So for example, if you're appealing a student's age limit because they were retained in elementary school at the kindergarten level and then again in 3rd grade due to FCAT scores, the committee needs to see when those retentions happened. So although we've asked for transcripts starting with the 8th grade, as an athletic director, seeing that your hardship is surrounding elementary school, it's going to be best if you pull transcripts back from when the student started school. That's going to show the committee when those instances of error occurred and be able to provide a little bit more background and understanding on why the student's in the situation they're in. If it's a medical hardship, the committee doesn't want that 90-page document where they've actually diagnosed the student. They're just going to want to see a letter from the physician who was handling the patient, explaining why the student had to miss an extended period of time that kept them out of school, that may have impacted their limit of eligibility. So it's details like that that are going to set the student up for success when it comes to these appeals. And remembering that a hardship is a situation that impacts your student individually. If it's something that impacted the entire student body, the entire set of student athletes in the state of Florida, that's not a hardship. That's something that is just happening to every student in the state of Florida. It has to be specific to your student that you're appealing for, specifically impacting them and their ability to participate in athletics, and then providing those details.
Yeah, again, having sat on section eligibility committee as an athletic director for a number of years, I can tell you, and you know this, the committee, they want to say yes. They're looking for a reason to say yes. Now, you mentioned age. If the kid has just aged out, that's a completely different issue. But if it's a matter of a week or a month or something like that, again, the committee's going to look at everything. Looking back at your days on the road, and again, no names, no schools, etc., can you think of one that going in, it just didn't look good, but over the course of the appeal, it had let's say, a positive resolution for everyone? Any one of those stick out for you?
There have been multiple. Usually when that happens for me, it's because all of the details were not included in the packet. So going in, you're not really understanding or seeing the hardship. But then once you actually get on site and you hear the testimony from the student athlete themselves, their family members, their coaches, their community members, their administration, and actually giving you the details of the situation, those have been surprising in some cases just because you weren't even aware of all of the hardships that the student athlete was facing.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. Just hearing that testimony and having it, having the student athlete speak on their own behalf. Just my opinion. I don't know if you agree or not, but far more impactful than, let's say, a mom or a dad or a coach coming in with, let's say, more than required bluster and trying to state their case. What do you think about that? Mm-hmm.
No, I agree. And you would be able to speak to this more than me, but you can kind of see it on the appeals committee members' faces when a student athlete starts speaking. These kids are the closest person to their situation. They know what's happening, they know how it's impacting them, they know how badly they want this. And when they're able to convey that, I do think it makes a difference. I think the committee then understands this isn't just a parent pushing this forward. This isn't just a coach trying to get the star player back on the field. This is actually something that's impacting the student.
No, 100%. I agree. And we as committee members, we certainly talk about that. All right, let's talk about, your position now. We're running out of time, but we've covered your history. We've talked about FHSAA. Looking ahead, where do you see the FHSAA, particularly in your area, eligibility and compliance, going? And maybe I'll put a little parameter on. I travel quite a bit and I talk to ADs from other states. They are amazed, and you alluded to it earlier, about the ease of transfer here in Florida. I joke, we already have the transfer portal. We've had it for years. Thank you to our state legislatures. With NIL on the horizon, or maybe it's already here, where do you see FHSA going, particularly with eligibility and compliance?
So That is one of those tricky topics where, here in the office, we have the ability to provide a little bit more consistency when the rules are coming from the top down. When you can guarantee that every school is going to follow the same rule, it provides the same boundaries for the member schools. Things like the transfer rule, where it gives a little more local control, can be good and bad. Those districts that have not gotten in front of it, or even private schools, and haven't developed anything, those kids, when they transfer, don't have the ability to participate because there is no good cause policy developed. And then on the other side of that, you have some really advanced good cause policies when it comes to transfers, where there are 8 different scenarios where a kid can maintain eligibility. So it creates some inconsistencies whenever we have the rules that are dictated by Florida statute, giving a little more local control, because there's just those variances. And depending on where the student wants to go to school can depend on whether or not he or she is going to be eligible. I don't necessarily see something like that changing. We're all about choice in Florida, and once you provide choice, it's really hard to rein that back in. So I think from an FHSAA standpoint, things like that are here to stay. Florida is going to continue to provide options, continue to provide choices for student athletes and their families. I think it's going to come down to more on what the individual member schools and districts want to see when it comes to these types of rules, and whether or not they want to provide any sort of consistency with that. Like I said, it's good and bad. Providing that local control, you can customize it to your community and what you're seeing within your school system. But I think things like that are going to continue here in Florida.
Yeah, you're right. It's tricky, but I thought you did a pretty good job of covering your bases there. Good stuff. Jordan, this has been cool. Catching up with you and finding out more about FHSAA, but we're not done yet. We always wrap things up with the athletic director's toolbox segment. Now, you're not an athletic director, but I think you know your way around the world of high school athletics. So we're going to take our final break, hear from Athletic Surveys, who sponsored this segment. When we come back, I'm going to challenge you to send out a brand new athletic director on their very first job, but I'm only going to let you put 3 things in the toolbox. So let's take that final break. And when we come back, we're going to see what Jordanne Stark puts in her new athletic director toolbox. We want to thank Athletic Surveys for their support of the podcast with the Athletic Director Toolbox segment. Athletic Surveys is about connections. They're going to connect you with a group you probably already hear back from, that group that wants to complain and gripe about everything. It's really only a small percentage of your stakeholders. Athletic Surveys will connect you with them, but they're also going to connect you to the 98% that supports your program. And that's tremendously valuable information to have when you're talking with a frustrated parent or student athlete, or maybe your principal, or even your school board. Go to athleticsurveys.com. They're going to create a custom survey that lets you take the pulse of everybody in your program. That's Athletic Surveys by LifeTrack. Check them out today. Hey, it's that time of the podcast. We've been visiting today with Jordanne Stark, the coordinator of eligibility and compliance for the Florida High School Athletic Association. Has a tremendous background, but right now I'm going to challenge her to send out a brand new AD on the very first job, but I'm only going to let her put 3 things in the toolbox. So Jordanne, what 3 items are going to go into your new athletic director toolbox?
So I'm going to start with knowing who your FHSAA liaison is for eligibility and compliance. I mentioned earlier, the last 2 years we've been separated 3 ways, and I handled schools G through O. Next year we'll be split 4 ways. So once we release who's handling what schools, know who your liaison is. Know what their phone number is, know what their email address is, reach out to them anytime you have questions. Just know who that person is and know how to get a hold of them. The second thing I would say is knowing how to find information. Having access to the FHSA handbook, whether it's carrying it around with you in your backpack, having it downloaded on your desktop. I like the desktop version because I can do a control find and find whatever information I'm looking for very quickly. I talked earlier about the file library. That's another great resource to find information, those flowcharts, sample documents. So know how to find the information. The last one I would say is the mentor program through the FIAAA. I think that's a tremendous resource for a new athletic director to set them up with a network of athletic administrators who are at a similar school, similar size, similar category to their own, so that they have that individual to reach out to for those real world examples that we as staff don't necessarily have on a daily basis. Those would be the three that I would put out there for a new athletic director.
Well, I mean, no surprise, they're all in that area of education, and appreciate the shout out for our state AD association, the FIAAA mentoring program. Jordan, one more time, if one of our listeners wanted to reach out to you and add you to their network or just find out more about eligibility and compliance, what's the best way they can get a hold of you?
Email jstark, STARK, @FHSAA.org. Or the main FHSAA phone number, 352-372-9551, and I'm at extension 230.
Well, Jordan, thanks again for sharing with our listeners. All the best as we enter the summer months here in Florida. And we're going to have to get you back on the podcast maybe this coming fall.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Hey, for our listeners, we want to say thanks to you. And just a reminder, we upload the Zoom recordings of all of our interviews to the Educational AD Podcast YouTube channel. We do this just about every day, sharing best practices. So come back next time for another great interview on the Educational AD Podcast.